In emergency management, the definition of a stakeholder is any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival or recovery of a given community.
This is the Stakeholder Prepping podcast, where the tactical comes from the practical, and today, you become your own stakeholder.
Here are your hosts, Chris and AC.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you, yes, you, are the stakeholder in your own survival. And AC, I know we are going to have a ton of fun with this one. This was actually a listener recommendation episode, but we probably took it way further down the rabbit hole than Paul anticipated. But before we get into that, I think we need to announce this now because this is a huge announcement. A bunch of our listeners have been asking about buying t-shirts or hats or other gear to support the show, and we finally figured out how to do that. So as of right now, when this episode goes live, we have a link to our store on our website. If you scroll about halfway down to the middle of our page at stakeholderprepping.com, you'll see a section that says to support the show. And there you can find a link to our eBay store and a separate button that links to our apparel storefront. And we're going to try to put some cool stuff up there, like limited edition t-shirts. There's a black one up there right now with a really cool graphic. And when we run out, we're going to take those down and replace it with a new design. So they are going to be actually limited edition. So get yours before we sell through them, and you'll have a cool new limited edition graphic t-shirt, every few months for you. But right now, you can actually get one, and it will be in hand before the holiday season. So if you've got a prepper on your gift list, you can get them a t-shirt and help support us at the same time. And AC, I think it's phenomenal.
It's a win-win. Yeah, and absolutely. This is the time because we're preppers. We shop early, right? We shouldn't be at the store looking for gifts for people at, December 23rd. You're just going to end up with like gift certificates and Flobies or something. Do they still sell Flobies? Is that still a thing?
I haven't seen those in a long time.
I haven't seen them in a while.
You can always go with the classic lottery ticket.
That's true. You can go with the lottery. It's very impersonal. The money, the lottery tickets, the gift cards. Buy them something cool. Buy them the limited edition Stakeholder Prepping cool black graphic tee, and they will be forever in your debt. So yeah, go check it out. Check out the store. Just so many people have asked. They're like, hey, I'd like to buying a Grim card or buying a map is cool, but I would love to have a t-shirt, and our graphic is kind of cool. Like our logo is pretty neat. But we're going to do some other cool limited edition and some funny little stuff. And there's a couple of hats and some t-shirts there and a hoodie. A lot of people have asked about hoodies too. So yeah, go check it out, support the show, and wear your cool Stakeholder Prepping logo everywhere.
I like it. So let's jump into the episode. What do you got for us?
All right. So here's the episode. And like you said, this was a listener recommendation. Our friend Paul said, he basically said, hey, it would be cool to do a show where you kind of, like, what do you find like out on the road or out in the bush that you could use for preparing or for survival situations? And I think we took this like way too far, but it was a super fun outline to write, and it was a very fun episode to research. So here's the episode. Let me set the stage for you. You're on the road in your post-apocalyptic wasteland or in an abandoned area, and you come across a small abandoned community. Let's say a few homes, maybe a commercial building like a warehouse or a small office building or an old store or something, maybe some broken down old vehicles out back. And this is an area that has been abandoned for quite some time. Picture everyone moving out and taking everything they could. Then a few bands of marauders come through and they took everything else that wasn't bolted down and most of the stuff that even was bolted down. And now we're going to give it a once-over. Essentially, we're talking about scavenging what's left when there's nothing left.
Man, that just sounds kind of sad and bleak already. It's like the road met Book of Eli and they had a child, and that
Hmm.
child's name is abandonment. But I'm game for it. So now you did a pretty good job of setting the stage. I want to clarify. We're talking about just empty buildings and maybe a couple of vehicles that were probably dead and abandoned long before people left. Like we're not looking at a Chernobyl site where everyone had to leave in an emergency and everything got left behind. This has been picked over, cleaned over. This is the dry, dusty bones at the end of the vultures have gone over everything. So probably no tires on the cars, no gas in the engine, no batteries even. The homes and buildings probably open and exposed to the elements. So really nothing worth taking unless you're a couple of super resourceful and creative preppers or you listen to the podcast. Am I on point?
Yeah, that about sums it up with what I was thinking. And I think everyone is going to learn something here. Hopefully, there will be at least one takeaway for everybody in this episode. And ideally, this stuff can be useful even if you're not in a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Good luck. So do we just want to kick this off and go back and forth like we normally do?
Yeah, I'm good with that. And I'll kick this off. So, I'm going to start simple and then I'll get gradually more ridiculous. But this is something that you can probably find on just about any 70s or 80s car, and even on some models as late as the early 2000s. And I actually have something exactly like this that I carry in both my travel backpack and in my get home bag. Although mine came on Amazon, I didn't steal it off of an early 2000s Cadillac Eldorado. But
Oh,
uh, I know. And here's what I'm going for. This is the setup. This is what it is the retractable FM radio antenna. And it
really?
it's crazy that these are like they were on all kinds of cars back in the day. When we were growing up, they were everywhere. And then I think just one day they just disappeared. But hear me out on this. You can easily remove these. Just try not to bend it in the middle if you can. If you break it off at the base, you can usually remove that lowest section if it's been like pinched or bent or something like that. So, what is this good for? The biggest thing is a straw, actually. These things are fairly tight when you fully extend them. So, you can use it as a straw. I actually carry a metal expandable straw with me like all the time when I travel. And this isn't just for like prepper stuff, but because they basically outlawed straws on the entire West Coast, and I don't wanna look like a weirdo when I'm sucking down my frappuccino. So, having having a this is a green thing, right? Like, it's dishwasher safe, and you can use it forever, and you're not throwing straws away so they get stuck up like a dolphin's nose or a turtle or something. I don't know what the threat is with straws, but anyway, they're just bad. So, but there's a bunch of prepper uses for the expandable straw like this. And these expandable antennas will often work very well for this. I saw an episode of Survivor Man where he did this. Did you ever watch that? I thought
Oh, yeah.
Les I forget his last name.
Les Stroud? Was that it?
Stroud, is it Stroud? Yeah, I've actually got some of his I've got like some of his signature gear. Like he had a really cool machete that was the signature Les Stroud gear, but um he did this in an episode of Survivor Man where he like found an abandoned car and he called it a drinking tube for some reason. Maybe he thought like the big straw lobby was going to come after him or something. He didn't want to get sued by Big Straw, I guess.
Copyright, trademark.
Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, so a drinking tube. But in this episode, he was drinking out of like small streams and even like some little mud puddles and stuff. And even if you needed to drink out of something you were collecting rainwater out of, having a straw can be super duper useful. And an expanding or expandable metal tube like this, it also makes a very good fire bellows. So if you're trying to start a fire, it's a lot easier to blow through a tube like this to concentrate that air and aid in combustion. It also keeps your face safely away from the fire, which is also cool if you like eyebrows. So this might sound kind of mundane or silly, but it really can be a useful tool, and you can probably find them on a lot of old abandoned vehicles. And because 1970s American chrome was basically apocalypse proof, if you find one, it's going to be in perfect shape.
That's a good point. And I do want to say that I think eyebrows have outlived their fashion ability. So going
Yeah,
around without eyebrows, I'm not worried about it.
I
Just,
guess that's kind of cool. And yeah, I mean, maybe in the apocalypse, nobody's going to have eyebrows anyway.
yeah, it's going to be the new fashion forward
It totally is.
apocalypse
Yeah, it's
proof.
probably you're right. It very so kind of that boho apocalypse chic will
There
have
we go.
no eyebrows. So anyway, what are you going to start with?
I was going to say also, if absolutely necessary, you can just use that thing as a discipline tool and smack the shit out of somebody's fingers.
Right. Or like if you needed to poke a dead body, because in the apocalypse you're always going to have to poke a dead body. So kind of like in Stand By Me. Was it Stand By Me where they had to go out and just poke the dead body? Like the whole movie was about them going to the dead body to poke it.
Now all I can think of is that meme with the character and the stick, and
Yeah.
it says, "Come on, do something."
Do the thing. Yeah, come on, do the thing. But it could be a old car antenna from the 70s or 80s. I think Cadillac Eldorado was the last one in America to finally get rid of that expandable FM radio antenna. I think it was the Eldorado. It was like early 2000s, which seems really late. But yeah, they were like the last ones to say, you know what, we can put the FM antenna somewhere else.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm going to stick with the car for my first item as well. And I'm going to pick over the car a lot here. We're assuming that any vehicles that we find have already been 100% picked over. So we have to get really creative here.
Right.
I,
Right.
I like the antenna. I've got a couple of things that I would look for in the car. The first being specifically magnesium. And obviously, magnesium is an awesome fire starter and it can even light wet wood. So you don't have to worry about drying or curing your fuel for a fire in an emergency situation because it burns at around 5,600 degrees in freedom fractions.
Yeah, that's not centigrade. That's real degrees.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 5,600 degrees, that's going to melt most metals. That's going to melt some thinner forms of concrete. That's going to definitely cook your food. It's going to be well done. But at that point, you probably are too. So any food is a blessing. High purity magnesium alloys, they were really prized back in the day for their exceptional lightness because magnesium is 75% lighter than steel and about 33% lighter than aluminum. They've also been used in various automotive components since the 1930s, especially where weight reduction offered a performance advantage. You don't see it a whole lot on aircraft because that much magnesium gets cost prohibitive, especially in the larger frames. But probably the most famous and widespread historical use of magnesium in an old car is the Volkswagen Beetle, actually, because the engine case and the crankcase from the 1950s through about the 1980s, they were really an iconic example. The engine block, also called the crankcase, for the air-cooled VW Beetle, the Karmann Ghia, and the bus, the VW bus, they were magnesium alloy, and specifically they were AS41 alloy. Volkswagen was one of the largest consumers of magnesium in the automotive industry for decades because of that part specifically. And some luxury and high performance vehicles, like some vintage Porsches, they worked with magnesium engines as early as 1928. The early MW N52 water cooled engine that had a magnesium alloy engine block. So a lot of vehicles used magnesium oil pans and valve covers as well. And the lighter covers and kind of those auxiliary engine parts, they were cast from magnesium alloys. The other place that you can find high purity magnesium is in racing and high performance wheels, magnesium alloy wheels, uh, because they were the original quote unquote mag wheels before the term became a generic for any alloy wheels. So magnesium
Oh,
was kind of that go to lightweight material and it created the term mag wheels.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so when they say a mag wheel, I just thought that was, I don't know, like the design or something, racing wheels, mag wheels, but because originally they were magnesium and then they just became synonymous with like light drag racing wheels.
Yeah, and I always thought when I was growing up, I always thought they were called mag wheels for magnum. Like everything had to
Oh,
be magnum. No, it's
sure.
magnesium.
Got it.
I'm
Okay.
I'm that idiot. But now, magnesium in quantity, I don't think you're going to have an impact gun to get the entire oil pan off. You're probably not going to be able to get through the valve covers with your multi-tool in your pocket. So you need to scrape off some small pieces to get them to ignite. But having magnesium can be a very, very useful tool if you're in that fire starting in all situations emergency. And if you get enough of it, you can also pack flares with it. You can create tripwires that will burn and let everybody know where your target is and keep you safe.
Oh yeah, and magnesium's awesome. I mean, and the fact that I didn't realize you could find it like everywhere. So we're looking for older VWs. If we've got old crashed out VWs or something like a Porsche that used a VW engine, then we're probably going to be able to find some high purity magnesium and scrape
Yes.
that off, hang on to it. It's got an unlimited shelf life, right? I mean, magnesium will just last forever.
That, or if you go into certain neighborhoods where there's a lot of nicer cars, or I don't want to say nicer cars because a lot of them are just absolute pieces of junk, but the ones that have got the upgraded rims, the loud engines, things like that, you might be able to pull some off the wheels too.
Sure, I like it. Okay, so if we're sticking with the car, I've got one more before we move somewhere else. And like you said, 12-volt battery probably gone. And that's an easy thing to remove and it's very useful. So I get why those probably are gone in this scenario. But the other big piece of that charging system is the alternator. And 12-volt alternators are extremely useful, especially if this is an older car. Newer cars oftentimes they need to see other components of the electrical system before the alternator will charge. Like it's looking for other stuff like on a network. But a lot of old cars, they have a very simple charging system. And a lot of them even have what's called a one wire alternator where the alternator itself, it just grounds by bolting onto something. And then you just run one wire from the alternator to the battery. And that battery is also kind of bolted to the same thing. So that creates that circuit. Your typical, I'm using air quotes, old car alternator, like the one found on, say, an old Chevy 350 engine, will probably output 35 to 40 amps. And that's a ton of power. That's probably 4 times more power than you would find like the max output of your typical 3 to 4 foot 12-volt solar panel, like on
It's
Amazon.
enough to lock up your hand if you grab the wrong thing, for sure.
It's a ton of energy. If you think about a typical solar panel that you might buy on Amazon, like a 3, 4 foot tall, maybe 130 watt type solar panel, an alternator will crank out 3 to 400% more energy. So you could hook that thing up to a treadmill or a bike, or you could make a windmill, or you could make like a little water wheel with it. Uh, you could even make a 12-volt generator out of like a two-stroke motor. So if you had like a lawnmower or something, you could make a 12-volt generator out of that. That would just generate a ton of energy. So super useful in an SHTF situation. It can charge all of your electronics and it doesn't require sunlight. And you could spin it without making a lot of noise if you needed to, so you could stay quiet. And if you're like Chris and you've got 5 dogs, you could hook this thing up to a treadmill with a hamburger on the end of a fishing pole. Boom, unlimited free energy for life.
Until they wisen up and go off the back and take all the bait with them.
Just figure they could just walk around back and grab the hamburger. Yeah, exactly. So if you've got like out of the pack, if you've got a dumb dog, then that one, unlimited free energy. I'm telling
There
you.
we go. There we go. Just happy to be running. That sounds like a Malinois for
Yeah,
sure.
mush,
ADHD in a bottle.
mush. Turn my alternator, dog. Charge my cell phone.
So on that, I'm going to go for some fuel next. And this is very specific to a lot of older homes, especially in the Northeast. But what a lot of people don't know is that many old homes have buried oil tanks for their heaters. So an oil heated home, it had a kerosene or fuel tank that was a lot of the time buried. And some neighborhoods, some municipalities have gone around trying to remove these because they do pose an environmental threat. But if you happen to find one that still has just the tank, there may be some oil still down in there. And that home fuel is extremely close to diesel, but it also happens to last longer than road diesel because of the difference in sulfur content. So it doesn't expire as fast. So you could probably, 25 years after it's been touched last, you could probably still get it to burn. It's obviously it isn't street legal to run in a vehicle, and if it doesn't have the lubricants that are required for a diesel engine, but I mean, at that point, do you really care? And in a pinch, I would absolutely run it in a diesel vehicle. Some older
Or if
homes,
you're Tina Turner in Beyond the Thunderdome, her car was actually a jet engine,
yeah,
so you could
yeah,
run
I'll
it
bet
in
it would
that.
work like avgas.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, diesel and jet fuel are identical.
So I'll bet it's basically jet fuel that's in there, but it's home heating oil.
Yeah, it's like red dyed, so you can't run it on the road. And I think, yeah, you're right. There's a sulfur content issue. It's something about lubricating the motor, and I don't know enough about it, but that's exactly the difference in sulfur content. But it makes it last longer. That home heating oil.
Yeah, and some old homes, they have above ground tanks and they're pretty easy to identify, but some of those underground tanks, they can be a little bit harder to find. It's usually just a little metal cap in the yard somewhere. And without a hand pump, you are going to have a difficult time accessing it. You're not going to take a hose and try to suck up all of that old fuel. If it's been years and maybe the fuel is going bad or getting stale, I'm still going to harvest it and mix it with the old used motor oil in that car in the yard and basically run it in my waste oil burning heater or stove or oil lamp, something to give me light. Probably not cooking fuel at that point, but in a pinch, possibly. And there are some good options out there for used oil burners, but along those lines, there are some other good uses for that old used motor oil in the car. So, corrosion prevention to wood treatment, making fire starters, even a de-squeaker for hinges if you have a temporary bivouac or bug out site and it's been a little bit since anybody's been there, you don't want anybody to know. A little bit of used motor oil on the hinges. You can open that door and close it all day long and nobody will know that you're there.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah, a de-squeaker. I like that. And yeah, good on you for finding use for the old motor oil. Because yeah, old motor oil. Yeah, it breaks down and it's not as good of an engine lubricant, but it stays that black dinosaur juice for like ever.
A
It's
long
a
time.
long time. It's very viscous, and you're right. You could burn it and all kinds of things. Oil lamp is a good one. I actually have a couple of those, like just old oil lamps, like Victorian kind of oil lamps, and it's a good thing to have. It's a good thing on your pace model for light because yeah, you can burn all kinds of stuff in it. You could burn vegetable oil in it if you needed to. So really good thing to have.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
so next, I'm gonna get a little more ridiculous here, but I am gonna go for batteries. And remember, we said that car battery would be gone, and that's true. But there are some other places to harvest 12-volt batteries. And in the apocalypse, 12-volt batteries are going to be priceless. Unlike car batteries, which are generally like unsealed wet batteries and they will lose their water over time, there are these SLAs, which are sealed lead acid batteries that may be hidden in plain sight. And there are three places that we can look for 12-volt batteries in this scenario. If you see a property out in the middle of nowhere with a gate, like a security gate, almost all of these actually run on 12-volt batteries. There's usually
Really?
yeah, there's usually mine has 12-volt batteries in this little plastic like control box and they're all like that. They have a cable that's plugged in to the wall somewhere, plugged into the grid, and all that does is actually charge the batteries. But those gate arms are actually just little 12-volt motors like you'd find in an old race car. That's all that's in there. So um
Interesting.
yeah, but they're all ran off. sealed lead acid or SLA batteries, probably about a 7 amp hour battery. And there's going to be one or two of those inside any of those control boxes that you see on old gates. Now, somewhere else you can find an SLA battery is inside any of those green exit signs. If you have any of those like light commercial industrial buildings, any of those big exit signs or floodlight boxes, there's usually a decent sized 12-volt battery hidden inside. And this is obviously so the emergency lighting works when the power's out. But you can harvest those sealed lead acid batteries out of those exit signs or floodlights.
And then recharge them with your 12-volt
Alternator. Yeah.
alternator.
Yeah. You may have to refresh those. And I was actually going to talk about that a little bit. But the last place that you would find an SLA battery is there is a 12-volt backup battery inside any of those Verizon Fios routers. If you see those Fios routers, there is a 12-volt battery inside those. And it's actually a pretty decent size 12-volt battery inside them. And the reason that exists is for the VoIP phone, so you could still call 911 during a power outage, and that's why those are in there. So there's like a big brick battery inside every one of those, and a lot of people just don't know it until the power goes out and their phone doesn't work, and they call Verizon and they say, "Oh, when was the last time you replaced your Fios battery?" Now any of these batteries will likely be dead by the time we're scavenging them in this scenario, but because these are sealed batteries, unlike a car battery, there are ways to bring them back. And this is called desulfating a battery. And there's chargers out there with desulfation modes. I have one and I use it all the time. I have literally brought batteries back from the dead. But this mode sends short bursts of high voltage energy to basically break down these sulfite crystals in the battery. And you can also do this yourself by running a couple of batteries in series and delivering higher voltage to this battery. Look it up. Don't take my advice for it because I don't want to be the reason you blow anything up. But I have done this. I've done this before. I've brought 12-volt batteries back from the dead. And because all these batteries I just told you about are sealed, they're SLA batteries, then they are still going to be wet even years after being inactive. So you can refresh them or what they call equalize them in the solar world. And since I already told you where to pick up an alternator to charge them, you now have a fully functioning apocalyptic power backup system.
That's super interesting. I like that a lot.
Kind of neat. Yeah. So look into refreshing batteries. It's crazy. I'm the kind of guy that I'm always throwing the old batteries out or taking them back and, using them as a core charge. But there are ways to bring lead acid batteries back from the dead by desulfating, by using this quick burst of high voltage. And it basically just like knocks the stuff off the battery that causes those plates to grow together, and causing those plates to touch each other inside with those sulfites is kind of what makes them not be able to hold a charge. But you can bring batteries back even when they're pretty old, and there's a couple of different ways to do it.
Very interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that so I don't blow up my fingers. But speaking of blowing stuff up, you brought it
Ooh,
up.
okay.
Let's get a little bit creative here and bring in some chemistry background. Let's talk about thermite.
I love thermite.
So thermite is a pyrotechnic composition of metal powder and a metal oxide that produces an intense exothermic or heat generating reaction when ignited. That's the definition of thermite. The most common mixture is aluminum powder and iron oxide, or rust, which reacts to create molten iron, aluminum oxide, and a large amount of heat. So when I say a large amount of heat, we're talking over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cooking. It is a chemical reaction and it is extremely stable until you ignite it. But once ignition happens, you cannot put this out. This is what they use to weld new railroad tracks together. And they use it to weld underwater because it has its own oxidizer. So you need to be careful with it. But you can melt steel, weld metal together. You can do all kinds of things with thermite. And it's basically 3 parts iron oxide or 3 parts crushed up rust to 1 part aluminum by weight. So 3 ounces of rust and an ounce of aluminum powder, screen it, and you have this dingy brown looking material. That's your thermite fuel. And so any of the leftover appliances, most of the car parts, they're going to be either high purity aluminum or they may have some rust if it's steel car parts. And you can scrape all of that up. But the hard part is really turning it into powder. So you do need a grinder or a file and a bunch of elbow grease. I have made thermite from an aluminum bike frame before. It's not easy. It's a pain in the ass. The other thing that you need is that iron oxide, the rust. A ton of places in this scenario that you've kind of laid out for us that we can get iron rust, but I'd probably look around old barbed wire first, as it's very high iron content and it's been exposed to the elements and rusted intentionally. It's not galvanized or anything like that in most cases. Harvesting the iron oxide is probably going to be easier said than done, but it's a lot easier than the aluminum. Just make sure you're up to date on tetanus because you're going to snap one of those wires and it's going to come and try to strangle you or something like that. Um, but igniting thermite is also not easy. It does need to get super hot. Um, Luckily, you already know where to get magnesium. That will absolutely get the job done. But even in some cases, a blowtorch is not hot enough to light thermite directly. So
Wow.
something to be aware of.
I didn't realize I played with both of these things, both magnesium and thermite. I didn't realize that thermite wasn't as hot as magnesium. I didn't know that. I thought thermite was way hotter because it was like this intense reaction, but I guess it's not. It looks like magnesium burns about 1,000 degrees or 500 degrees hotter, I guess, than thermite. I didn't know that.
Magnesium burns hotter, but it also burns a lot faster.
Right. Right. Yeah. Speaking of all this fire and chemistry, and you just told people how to basically make a bomb, did we do any kind of safety thing on this?
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
We didn't do the disclaimer at all. And now you're talking about lighting stuff on fire, and I totally forgot. I didn't say, hey, you know what, Chris? Maybe you should do the classic Chris safety brief before we get into this one.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught trying to scrape magnesium off of your neighbor's oil pan at 3 o'clock in the morning because nothing good is going to come of that. And if you start making thermite, you're going to end up on a watch list. Just be aware.
Yep.
Be careful and know what your local laws and ordinances are.
Yeah, and breathing aluminum powder probably isn't good for you either. So
It definitely is not.
use your PPE on this stuff. So, but okay, I'm going to get kind of crazy here and start ripping into walls, but follow me here. Sheetrock or drywall is made up of gypsum, and gypsum is just calcium sulfate. Technically, it's calcium sulfate dihydrate. And there are a ton of prepper uses for this stuff. Most homes in the post lath and plaster era have walls and ceilings made of this stuff. In older homes, like pre 1978, you might bump into lead paint. So have a way to deal with that. Again, when we're talking about the safety brief, in this scenario, you might bump into some lead paint. But regardless, you don't want the paint, you don't want the paper holding the drywall together for any of the things I'm about to talk about. But if you can tear some sheetrock out of the walls and break up the gypsum into a super fine powder, like we're talking a mortar and pestle thing, and trust me, like if you've never done this before, crushing gypsum is not that tough. If anybody listening has ever done like sheetrock or drywall work, you know that like 90% of that job is not getting the sheetrock to turn into a fine powder. So
Yes.
it's pretty easy to break this stuff up, but there are all kinds of uses for this stuff. In a long-term survival scenario where farming and gardening are going to be critical preps, gypsum can be highly valuable as a soil conditioner and a fertilizer. Gypsum provides essential plant nutrients, specifically calcium, which is important for cell walls and nutrient absorption, and sulfur, which is vital for protein synthesis and enzyme functions. And it's super effective at loosening up clay soils. Where I live, I have very clayey soil, and I'm always getting a giant load of really good, like, garden dirt and fertilizer every year delivered for the garden, or I'll go pick it up in my trailer. But in this kind of scenario, using some crushed gypsum, it will improve aeration and drainage and water penetration in these kinds of clayey soils. So this is crucial for healthy root growth and preventing waterlogging on the roots. Um,
That's
it's
really interesting because
Yeah.
if you live in some place with dense clay soil or like a river delta or something like that, I'm thinking of like New Orleans.
Yep.
If you live down in one of those areas, you could go and rent an auger or a grinder for your yard, grind it all up, and mix in a bunch of gypsum powder, and not have the water flood problems that you
Yeah.
normally do.
Yeah, it's really good for these clayey soils just for drainage and aeration. It's also really good at reducing high sodium content in the soil. These what they call sodic soils. It helps leach out excess salts and it improves conditions for plant growth. And while it's generally pH neutral, gypsum can help treat aluminum toxicity that's found in acidic subsoil, so it allows for deeper root growth. Again, it's very good to mix up with your soils. And when you heat gypsum, it's called calcined, something like that. Um, Gypsum becomes basically a plaster of Paris. So calcium sulfite hemihydrate. Yeah, hemihydrate. Yeah, I think that's what it is. And when you mix this calcined gypsum with water, it rehydrates and then it will quickly harden. And then it forms this super durable material, this plaster of Paris. So this can be used for casting molds for tools or replacement parts. If you've got a way to, melt things in these molds, it's very good for that. And
Oh.
yeah, like you can make a mold and you could pour super hot, liquid metal in. You can also use this to cast broken bones. You could take fabric and soak it in this calcined gypsum water mixture and it will harden just like those old casts before they use the new like fiberglassy ones. But that's what the old casts were essentially, a plaster of Paris. So your expedient broken bone fixing, you could use gypsum, which is just sheetrock.
So if I break my leg, all I've got to do is then grind it into the walls, grind it all up, heat it, mix it with water, and dip an old pair of jeans in it, and I've got a cast.
Boom, you're there.
I like it.
Yeah, gypsum, you never thought of it. And it's just right there in every wall in every old home. So if you've got, an old abandoned home and there are sheetrock walls that aren't totally gross from, the weather hitting them, you can rip that out, take the paper off, and just crush that gypsum up. And it has so many prepper uses.
Very, very cool. And while you're, ripping into the walls and tearing apart people's old houses, can you grab me some of those window counterweights you find in there?
Ooh, yeah. What are you gonna do with those?
So they're called sash weights in older homes, and generally they're cylindrical or rectangular weights. I actually have a few of them at the house. Um, they're kind of concealed inside the walls of older homes next to the window frames, but a lot of the time they are 100% lead. So I've got 50 or 60 pounds in 10-pound bars of these old sash weights. And obviously, there's a ton of uses for lead, but one of the most popular prepping uses is casting bullets, and these sash weights are pretty perfect for it. You can cut off however much you need, melt it down, cast it, and you've still got your block. But another great place to find lead would be in the wheel weights for any of those old cars that we find. anything older than 2009 is probably going to have lead weights, and even some wheel weights as late as 2011 are going to be lead. But you kind of got to be aware because some of them are steel, some of them are tungsten. Kind of depends on
Zinc,
where
I
you are.
think. A lot of
Yes,
zinc now in wheel weights, right? Didn't Forrest tell us that?
yeah, a lot of
So
zinc. So
the
you
older ones.
got to be aware of what you're looking at. But those are generally going to be high purity lead for smelting. And obviously, there's plenty of other uses for lead, like making fishing weights to go with some of those Grim fishing cards that we've got. If we had more time, I'm sure AC, you'd love to talk about using lead to make lead acid battery from scratch, but I don't know that
Oh,
we're going to have that much time.
we are going to have to do an entire episode on making batteries from scratch. I would love that. You just need a little electrolyte membrane, and I'll stop. But we don't talk enough about Grim. You're right, the Grim fishing cards. And so recently, I did go backpacking, and I took some of my Grim cards and actually did go fishing. I got a couple little nibbles. I saw them. There were tiny little fish at this lake we were backpacking at. But yeah, the one thing that I didn't have with my Grim card was the lead weights. I had to pack separate little lead fishing weights. But Grim cards are just awesome because it was just in my wallet. Like I didn't think about the fact that, oh, should I go fishing? I'm like, no, here I have got all the tackle in my wallet right now. What's our Grim code? We'll put a link, but check Grim out. I love them, and you get 10% off with us. So, um, now as we're taking this old home apart, I'm gonna check out the kitchen, and this is where I'm gonna get a little crazy, but this is awesome. Uh, and there are chances that the oven is probably still there because it's big and it's heavy and it doesn't have a ton of precious metals inside it. So you can't turn it to gold or meth or anything. But the oven doors can be extremely useful. And let me explain. Oven doors are extremely well insulated. And obviously, the glass window is a multi-pane window with excellent thermal resilience. If you could obtain a handful of old oven doors, you could make an amazingly low temp capable greenhouse or cold frame for gardening.
Oh, so you're thinking long term
I'm thinking
on this
long
one.
term. Absolutely. These are going to be rust resistant due to they're either made out of stainless steel or this enamel coating. And if you could find a few of these, maybe even supplement with some of the windows from the old homes or buildings that aren't broken, you could make a greenhouse that would be exponentially more insulated than like that polycarbonate greenhouse with the little panels that you buy on Amazon. And because of the multi-pane nature of oven doors, that window is basically it's going to be better at retaining heat in extremely low winter temperatures because it's going to double up on that greenhouse effect, where these short wavelengths of sunlight will come and pass through these multiple panes of glass. And then they hit the ground, and then those wavelengths bounce back off the inside of the greenhouse as they become longer and they get stuck inside there. That's basically how the greenhouse effect works. So that's your thermodynamics lesson of the day. But some oven doors, they're super insulated. The windows are multi-pane, super insulated. If you could stack up a couple of these oven doors, you could make an extremely low temp greenhouse or just like a cold frame gardening box with these.
That's that's really cool.
I'm getting creative.
Yeah. Well, if we're gonna get creative,
Okay.
I'm gonna try to find an old toilet or two.
Okay.
So it might sound crazy, but the toilet tank lid is actually a super useful piece of salvageable prepping gear. And And here's why. It's made of a thick ceramic that's called vitreous china with a layer of glaze fused on top. And that smooth, hard finish on the toilet tank lid, and really the rest of the toilet in most cases, it's not technically paint. It's essentially a glaze or a glass coating that's fused to the ceramic or the porcelain at extremely high temperatures. And we're talking thousands of degrees Fahrenheit inside of a kiln. And so it makes that whole surface non-porous and extremely durable. So this is a semi-flat surface, and now you have a great place to process game meat or any other kind of food because it can be easily cleaned and disinfected, unlike a lot more far more porous surfaces like a wooden cutting board. As soon as you cut into it, it's going to have a gap for bacteria growth and fungus growth and all sorts of stuff. But if you run your knife into that tank top, then your knife is actually going to get dull before you damage the tank.
Wow, I see what you're saying. So you're saying because this is super smooth, because you're right. I'm thinking about a porcelain tank on top of a toilet. It's very smooth, even compared to like granite or like marble countertops. Like there's no porousness to it at all.
Right, unless it's
Yeah,
chipped. And
sure.
what you're looking at is when they pour those into a mold, then they heat the one side of the mold and just bake it in there, and it melts that that ceramic, and it creates its own glass structure. So that's why it does that. But now you've got this super, super smooth, uh, antimicrobial, easily cleaned surface. And if you can find two of those lids, you can kind of clamshell them together, and you have this super awesome thermal chamber for keeping food warm. Or if you need to use that as your fire pit to keep
Oh,
yourself warm during the night, it's it does have a small opening so you can get oxygen to it, but you could put coals in there and have a warming plate all night long and not have to worry about, burning down your emergency structure. And they are by design a super thick insulator for, you know, they handle heat. So they handle it pretty poorly. So if you do put two of them together, that void inside would be an excellent post-apocalyptic hot food keeper. Um, but you're not going to burn yourself because it doesn't transfer heat the same way.
oh, I see. So it's very well insulated, but it doesn't transfer very well. Like you couldn't cook on one of these. But as far as taking two toilet lids and clamshelling together, that void inside is just gonna retain heat really, really well.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay,
So
that makes
anything that
sense.
you need to cool slowly, like your parts that you cast in your gypsum, if
Oh,
those need to cool slowly, you just toss them into one of these, toss the second tank lid over the top, and now you've got kind of that even platform, so you're not going to break stuff just from the tempering. So, and I think one of our metallurgist or blacksmith listeners can probably think of a reason to use this setup in an industrial setting, just because the inside would maintain temperature for a very long time and wouldn't transfer that temperature outside. But we'll wait for the email back on this episode to find out if we're even semi correct on that one.
I see what you're saying, though. I like that. Yeah, so that you take two of those toilet tank lids. Hopefully, they're the same toilet, so they made up together perfectly, right?
Ideally, yes, but
Yeah,
beggars can't be choosers.
right.
Another thing that you can use porcelain for, whether it's the tank lid or others, um, I mean, in an emergency, being attacked, the toilet tank lid can be used as a blunt force weapon,
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and it'll do some damage. But porcelain and ceramics, if you going back to the car, if you pull out the spark plugs, or you can do this with your toilet tank as well. But if you pull out the spark plugs and break the ceramic coating off of that, you get kind of these little stars, and you can throw those at other windows and they will shatter almost instantly. As long as it's not a laminated, like I think it's got to be level 2 or level 3 ballistic rated glass for it not to go through.
Wow. Yeah. Is that just because it's so dense, or because it's sharp, or both?
I think it's a combination of both, and the fact that ceramic does not bend, because glass is basically a super cooled liquid. It
Mhm.
never actually becomes solid.
Yeah, it's flexible.
So, yeah, it's weird. And if you're ever looking at older buildings and need to make an entrance, try to break the window towards the top because it will break a lot easier than down towards the bottom because that glass has just spent the last 100 years or so draining down and getting thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top.
Oh, it's skinnier at the top. I've noticed that before. Yeah, where you get like it looks almost kind of droopy.
Yeah.
That's
So if you're
that's
trying to
really interesting.
if you're trying to break into some place, aim for the top of the window, but you can use ceramic stars either from breaking engine pieces or specifically the spark plugs or toilet tanks, and you can use those for entry into a lot of places that you wouldn't normally be able to get into.
Nice, that's really good. Now, one other thing is, there's 2 places we could find little motors, and that would be the dishwasher and maybe if we could find a microwave. Microwave's one of those things where sometimes they count as part of the house and sometimes they don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
when you purchased your home, it may or may not have come with a microwave because somebody just decided that a microwave is like a part of it's like an appliance, even though you could just, like, pick it up. Um but in this kind of scenario, if if the microwave is there, there's some useful stuff inside of a microwave. Like there's some massive magnets inside a microwave, and we all know there's great uses for magnets in a post-apocalyptic world. You could take those
Oh, yes.
magnets and do magnet fishing, right? There's probably all those guns that all the preppers lost in the boating accidents are probably down there.
Of
So,
course.
yeah, so we could do some magnet fishing. Um, the one thing about taking the microwave apart, and this goes back to, making sure we have the safety brief and the disclaimer on this is there's a very, very powerful capacitor inside of microwaves that I don't know if it can kill you, but it can ruin your day. Like there's a ton of voltage in those capacitors, and I've heard of microwaves being unplugged for weeks, and that capacitor still maintains just a ton of energy. So be cognizant of that, but also that capacitor could be useful for a lot of things. So inside the microwave, if that thing exists, you've got a capacitor that can hold a ton of energy, and you've got giant magnets. You can do all kinds of cool preppery stuff with magnets. And then uh, there's a little motor in there, and most people don't know this, but if you take motors and spin them backwards, they actually do generate some amount of energy. If you put a multimeter on that motor that's sitting inside of a microwave and you turned that motor is going to generate a couple of volts of energy. I don't know if it's enough to like light a light bulb or something, but it does actually generate energy if you spin it backwards. So finding old motors, there's use.
If you hook it up right, it might be enough to charge your jump pack so that you've got USB capable charging.
Oh, that's actually real. That's a great point that, yeah, you're right. USB cables are not 12 volt. They're actually like 5 volts. And so if you have a motor that is only cranking out a little bit of voltage, obviously it wouldn't do any good like charging a battery or anything. But any USB powered stuff like your phone, if it's pumping out 5 volts or 6 volts or 7 volts, you're right. It absolutely would charge over that USB. That's a really good call. I didn't think about that. Any little motors you find.
It would probably be enough to charge your NOAA radio too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good call. And the motors, like I said, the motors inside of those gate arms, same thing. They generate some amount of energy when you twist those backwards. And it's funny because I know this because I had gate arms go bad and I had to go replace the motor. And there's a little like capacitor, no, sorry, a resistor on the motor leads. This little resistor in between the two of them. And the reason that little resistor is there is so the motor itself doesn't generate power. So as it closes, you've got some centrifugal force that's continuing to keep that motor spinning a little bit after you quit putting power to it. And the motor itself can generate power on its own. And so there's this little resistor there across the leads of that motor to keep it from generating its own energy. So if you clip that little resistor off of there, you could turn that motor backwards and it would generate some amount of energy. And those are DC motors. So anything in a gate arm is going to generate some amount of DC power. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that you could charge a USB with by spinning. It's like a little mini alternator. It's a little mini generator at that point. So that's actually a really good one too.
And see, when you were talking about batteries, I was thinking, oh, marine deep cycle batteries. Those are sealed lead acid batteries.
Mm-hmm.
If you happen to come across a marina or a boat storage facility or a boat docking facility, you probably have access to thousands of batteries
Well, yeah.
in banks that you don't have to worry about. You just have to worry about access and
Yeah,
not
that's right.
shocking the crap out of yourself when you try to pull them.
But you're right, yeah, because I mean, boats are like RVs where they have a house battery and an engine starting battery. So those house batteries, those are the ones we really like for like the solar world. Those are the ones that can actually, run appliances and charge things. So you're right. Any kind of boat storage facility, if you could find any of those deep cycle marine house batteries, those are really solid batteries too. That's a really good call. Anything else you can think of? It's funny, Chris, when we talk about this, because originally, when Paul emailed us and said, "Hey, I'd like you to do an episode about, things you could find on the road and use," he probably wasn't thinking, "Hey, just go start punching holes in walls and pulling things out and see what you can make of them." Well, I think we probably took it a bit to the extreme, but there's some very cool stuff in here that I bet people just don't think about.
I'm sorry to Paul's wife because the holes in the wall are not our fault. It's
Yeah.
an experiment.
Honey, we need gypsum. The soil's got a lot of clay in it. The guys on the podcast said so.
Well, and now I think we need to do an episode coming up here pretty soon on maybe the places, the secondary or tertiary places to raid after without rule of law has settled in. So, for example, do you go to Home Depot or Lowe's? That's
Oh,
probably pretty well picked over.
yeah.
So
The
where else
Marauders
can
are
you
there.
go?
Yeah, that's a good call. You're right. Some of these weird places where, yeah, where you could find cool stuff like the RV and boat storage facility or things like that people probably are blowing right by because they're on the way to Costco to loot that.
Exactly. So a veterinary clinic is going to have a lot of meds.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah. People med and vet meds are very, very similar.
So we will definitely have to take that one on and tackle it. But before we close this one out, I just want to invite all of our listeners to visit stakeholderprepping.com. We do have brand new t-shirts. We even have tactical assault flip-flops available.
Yeah, yeah.
Those
Tactical
are
assault flip
those
flops.
are so fun. But definitely join us next week. We are going to take on an entirely new topic. And until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder. We'll see you then.